Great. So Stephanie, hi, good morning. Would you be able to please pull up the presentation? So hi, this is Cindy Osorto. I'm the chair of the Just Transition Working Group, and today is November 15, 2024. We're just going to go ahead and get started. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so just giving an overview of today's agenda. So we have some updates about programs that Cindy will go over. We have a history of the Empower program, which will be given by Erin Crosgrove, who is from the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships. And then we'll have a study update from the National Renewable Energy Lab by Jamie Lopp. And then we'll have a bit of time at the end for public comment. Back to you, Cindy.
Stephanie, can you please do roll call?
Oh, yes, I can. Let me go back. Okay, yeah. Let me do roll call. Going down the list, Senator Dawn Guile.
Morning. Good morning, I'm here.
Senator John Moutz is on the line. Thank you. And then Delegate Regina Boyce. Delegate David Frazier Hidalgo. Cindy Osorto.
Present.
Chanel Viator.
Present.
Allison Breitenauthor.
Present.
Richard Strong. Jason Asher. Rico Albuquerques. Donna Edwards. Gerald Jackson. Jerry Williford Jr. Sean Stracer.
Here.
Thank you. Casey Ross. Stephanie Johnson. Moira Cyphers. Aaron Appel. Brad Phillips. Lynn Nash. Kimberly Haven. Jennifer Walsh. Suzanne Murkowski. Tiffany Fisher. John Hines. Tanya Terrell. And Khalid Malik. I think I saw you.
I'm here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Khalid. And then, yeah, that should be it for roll call, Cindy. I think back to you.
Great, thank you. So we don't have too many members joining us today. We are trying our best to do outreach from MD's end, but we are still working on that. And please note that if there's any missing seats and you might know of someone that might be interested, please do reach out. The membership list on our website is up to date. We are taking your recommendations. So please do note that we keep track of attendance as well as membership. And if there are members that are not attending, we are now going to be reaching out to see if there might be alternatives that might be better able to attend moving forward. Oh, Michael Walsh is another, I'm sorry, Michael Walsh is another member. Michael, thank you for joining us. Michael, I'm sorry to put you on the spot since you just joined, but would you be able to briefly introduce yourself to the group, please, since I believe this is your first meeting? Did we lose Michael? He joined and then he left. Okay, well, we'll move on. So again, everyone, thank you for joining. I was able to see a few this week at the Greater Baltimore Summit. It was organized by Morgan State University alumni, and it was a beautiful, beautiful event where people were asking a lot of really good questions about how Baltimore can maximize all of these amazing resources that have become available through bipartisan laws at the federal level and a lot of incentives at the federal level. So I did want to start off with just kind of a little bit of background on myself, because I realized that I had in the past mostly talked about the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022. I've talked about recent laws that passed here in Maryland in 2024. I've talked about different programs that are available, and I haven't really talked about why I care about this work. So today, just wanted to briefly kind of touch on why I care. I'm from Miami. I grew up in Miami, and so I knew from a young age that climate change is real. I've experienced multiple hurricanes in my lifetime, and it is concerning to me that there is sea level rise because I've already seen it. And I also really care about the environment because at the local level, because I saw the impact that it can have when people come together and do good work. I think one of my earliest experiences was just in high school. I had the chance to volunteer a lot with my friends. We would go out to the beach and we would collect trash, and we would feel really proud of the work that we would do in collecting this trash. And it's a small thing, but it brought us together. And at the end, we would collect a T-shirt, or we would have pizza together, and it was just a way of giving back to the community and to Earth. And because I was exposed to that, it kind of carried on when I graduated from college and I got an internship with the Bureau of Land Management. I went to New Mexico, Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I was able to learn about national environmental policy. There was a executive order at the national level, and I was able to work on some planning efforts there. And then after I did that summer program, which I was very grateful to have gotten through an internship program, I was able to then go to get my first kind of real career role with the Bureau of Land Management in DC, and stayed there for about a year and a half. And after that, I went into state government. I used to work with the Maryland Energy Administration, was just really, really impressed by a lot of the amazing work that goes on in Maryland, thanks to the work of really advocates and nonprofits and businesses coming together, and our amazing, amazing representatives and at the General Assembly coming together to ask questions about how to protect the environment. And I've been working with MDE for about 7 years, and so I've seen a lot of changes during my time with MDE, and I wanted to just kind of let you guys know that there's a lot of really good work going on. And just recently, 2 events that I had the pleasure of attending was the Just Transition Fund convening and the Greater Baltimore Climate Summit that I mentioned earlier, both of which focused on ways to help local economic development alongside green investments. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give an update on where we stand. Everyone should have already received an email from me saying that the great news is that 3 out of the 4 recommendations that we put forward to the Climate Change Commission were approved. If you want to take a close look at the actual recommendation language, it's on our website. You can check it out. Generally, what those 3 are is supporting labor best practices, supporting a green jobs outreach campaign, and investing in the expansion of workforce model programs, highlighting some of the existing Maryland Department of Labor programs. And there is one recommendation that is still pending Climate Change Commission approval, which is the principles recommendation. And that will be voted on November 19th by the Climate Change Commission. Next slide, please. I wanted to briefly touch on just a couple of currently available incentives by the Maryland Energy Administration. There is the Open Energy Innovation Program, and there is the Decarbonizing Public Schools program. So if you care about decarbonization and you have innovative ideas, these are 2 really, really amazing programs. And there is a lot of desire for good project proposals to go to MEA. If you want to learn more about existing and upcoming incentives that could help your community, the information is also on MEA's website. Next slide, please. I also wanted to just briefly touch on the fact that there is a member on the working group that represents an organization called Baltimore Gas and Electric, BGE. They are a utility company, and they applied and they were awarded a grant up to $50 million. And it is through the DOE Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnerships Program. They are proposing a interconnection readiness and deployment of storage program that would include developing community partnerships through local organizations such as Open Works or Howard County and Civic Works. And if members have been attending our meetings, then you might recall that we used to have a member who served on Civic Works. We actually lost Mr. Brian Trolley. He no longer works with Civic Works, so he is no longer able to serve on this working group. He is actually now working with the Maryland Energy Administration, which is a great win for our state, but a bit of a loss for this working group because he was an active, engaged member. But here we have that there is a lot of reason for optimism, even including for the Baltimore and beyond region to benefit from the bipartisan federal laws that have already passed. Next slide, please. So next up, I invited a lawyer from the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, which is a nonprofit that has a lot of experience in the energy efficiency space. I had mentioned in our April meeting that HB 864 passed in the General Assembly this year. It was supported by our governor, amongst many others, and it has the opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and produce a lot of community benefits. And in fact, it already has, and we're going to be learning more about that today. So we can close the slide and pull up our next presentation. And I'm really, really happy to share with everyone here that I was lucky to be able to find a guest speaker for everyone here. Her name is Ms. Erin Crosgrove, and she's a senior manager of policy and programs, again with NEEP, the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, a wonderful nonprofit organization. Ms. Erin, are you with us?
Oh, yep. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. I'm here, ready to go.
Yeah, so you can take it away.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Cindy, for inviting me to the group. I'm excited to talk about everything that's going on in Maryland and the potential for investing in a just transition for the energy efficiency workforce in Maryland. So, as Cindy said, I'm today to talk about Maryland Empower history, 24 updates, and future opportunities. Next slide, please. So before I get started, I wanted to give a little background on what NEEP is, or Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships. So NEEP is a regional energy efficiency organization, or a REO. As you can see from the map, there's 6 of us located throughout the United States, and we sit in between the federal government and the states to help states identify and enact innovative and transformative energy efficiency and building decarbonization policies. And our mission is to really drive change through collaboration and partnerships. And also, I'll just add, in NEEP, I lead the policy team. So my realm is tracking energy efficiency programs and tracking any advanced building decarbonization policies that pop up at the federal and the state level. So a lot of energy efficiency programs and IRA home energy rebates. Next slide. Great. And this is just a quick overview of what I'll be talking about today for the group. I'll have a brief history of Empower, the impacts of HB 864, and what we see in the new plans. Also a preview of energy efficiency workforce needs from a review of different assessments that have come out throughout our region. And also what some example programs and best practices for the state as they look to create a just workforce transition. And then we'll leave some time for questions from members of the group only. Next slide, please. Great. So first, I want to dive into kind of the history of Empower and what Empower is. So Empower is the energy efficiency program for the state of Maryland. Basically, it is energy efficiency programs are regulated by the Utility Regulatory Authority in the state. In Maryland, it's the PSC. They were initially created to lower energy savings because the least cost energy is the energy we never have to use. And so energy efficiency is supposed to find ways that we can reduce our energy usage. And so Empower was created in 2008 through legislation, and they had a statewide goal of 15% reduction by 2015. So from 2008 to 2015, about a couple percentage of savings every year. In 2018, the Empower statute was updated with a new savings goal of 2% for gross energy sales, which is actually some of the highest savings or We call them energy efficiency resource standards that states have in our country. The Northeast is unique in that we have a lot of states with energy efficiency programs, but Maryland does still stand out for having advanced goals. And then in 2022, Maryland enacted the Climate Solutions Now Act, which increased goals to 2.25% and 2.5% for energy savings. And then in 2024, we had the passage of HB 864, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Plans Act, and that actually just shifted the landscape for the energy efficiency programs and created greenhouse gas emission goals. So what the state is doing now is changing from reducing energy to reducing energy plus emissions. So it's new plans and new policies that go into place around that law, and I'll go into that a little bit more in the next slide. But just some highlights of benefits that we've seen from Empower so far. It's generated $1.61 for every $1 spent on the program. So it always provides more than what is invested in it. And in total, Empower has invested over $4.1 billion in programs. And as of right now, it has saved Maryland residents over $14.5 billion in energy costs over the life of all the measures installed. So it saved a huge amount of energy costs for the state. Next slide, please. So down into HB 864. So HB 864 established greenhouse gas reduction goals. And as I highlighted, energy efficiency programs used to have gas and energy savings goals. But with greenhouse gas reduction goals, that enables both gas and electric programs to have the same savings, which means fuel switching can take place. And it asks that programs are optimized so that they're able to both reduce energy and emissions reduction. And this is important because in order to achieve climate goals, energy savings alone won't get there. We need to think about how we can lower emissions. And that's also why I included the two charts on the side. The first is a pie graph or circle chart of how many Maryland's homes heat with fuels. And it's 71% according to that. And that can be gas or delivered fuels because Maryland's quite a big state with a different energy mix. And then the second chart below shows how much emissions reductions can be achieved by replacing gas with an electric device. So that's 62% for heating the home. Emissions can be reduced by putting in a heat pump instead of a gas furnace. And 59% of emissions can be reduced by adding a heat pump water heater instead of a gas heat pump water heater. And that's important for Maryland's climate goals and also for the state in order to lower emissions and ensure that the air is safe and clear. And as a result of shifting to GHG emissions goals, we actually saw the Empower programs kind of change their format and what they prioritize. And three things that stood out in the new filings that were submitted is utilities are now testing electrification programs, including heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. Utilities are also proposing programs that remove barriers to participation, such as health and safety remediation, knob and tube wiring, and panel upgrades. And they're also removing incentives for natural gas programs to focus on electrification. And that's really important because utility programs and energy efficiency programs are focused on market transformation. And from the building performance standard, zero emission heating equipment standard that Maryland is coming out with, and other policies, it's clear that the state is shifting towards a more electric grid. So it's great to see also the utility and energy efficiency programs go that way. And another aspect of the fact that these programs are changing is the workforce is going to have to change underneath them. Just to give a little insight, Maryland is one of 4 states that have a GHG emissions goal. I think it's Wisconsin, California, Massachusetts, and now Maryland. Massachusetts, it's on a second round of energy efficiency programs with a greenhouse gas emissions goal. And as a result, they have doubled their efforts in workforce training because they have realized that if they do want to create this impact, they need to retrain HVAC and uptrain new workers in order to ensure that the transition is successful. And so workforce is a huge part of this whole entire transformation. And that's why today I'll now talk a little bit about example workforce programs and what the workforce looks like in Maryland. Next slide, please. Great. So first I'll highlight This is some talking points from a survey that we've done of all the different gaps assessments that the states in our region have done. So NEEP covers from West Virginia up to Maine. And almost every state within that region has released a work study. So we've reviewed them, and these are just some high-level takeaways to think about. The first is highest in-demand jobs for our workforce are electricians, construction workers, and HVAC technicians. Also, there's a messaging issue. Oftentimes, contractors and other potential workers know little about the benefits of energy efficiency or the career opportunities that are presented in this field. And then from Maine and Vermont, who have very robust workforce programs, we've learned that successful energy efficiency and building decarbonization programs require an intentional and ongoing investment in the workforce and the supply chain. So they engage with contractors, distributors, and manufacturers to make sure that all parties are aligned on messaging. Next slide, please. And then this is a little snippet of what's like in Maryland right now. So the current energy workforce in Maryland is 125,000 or 125,007 energy workers, with over half, 66,570, that work in energy efficiency. In a recent report from the Maryland Energy Efficiency, or a recent Maryland Energy Efficiency Workforce Report highlighted that Maryland really needs to grow its energy efficiency workforce. It's going to need an increase of between 22 to 64,000 workers in the next 10 years, which is a 35 to 96% increase in workers, so nearly a doubling of the workforce. And it's important that as we do this, we also make sure that the workforce transition is equitable and just and lifts up communities that have been left behind in the past. So if we go to the next slide, my next couple of slides will be how we can ensure an equitable and just transition and some example programs that the state can look at as it considers next steps for workforce. Next slide. So just some 4 key aspects we see or to consider when you are creating a just workforce. The first is including wraparound services, as these services can alleviate barriers outside of the requirements of a job. So this is lack of childcare, attaining a driver's license, or other forms of transportation, and ensuring that the person in the training program has stable housing and food on the table when they come home. Also, another important aspect is funding on the job training and paying for certification to offset the initial cost of entering the field and providing more opportunities for the workforce to transition. And this can also provide a great opportunity for small businesses to grow their workforce with trained and knowledgeable individuals. It's oftentimes hard for small businesses to hire new people because they cannot afford to train them or to lose them for the time when they would need to go training. So providing the training and connecting these new employees with small businesses can help them grow and not have to work so hard to find new workers. Another key aspect is partnering with community organizations to help program administrators advertise these opportunities, coordinate the programs and benefits available from different sources, and then also offer mentorships and opportunities to grow in the field through having a support system. So a lot of these programs, they have varying levels of partnerships with community organizations. It can be marketing and recruitment, all the way up to a partnership, a true partnership, where the community organization recruits the workers, puts them in the program, and then they can provide the wraparound benefits while the program itself provides the training, so that they both are able to bring resources to the table to help that worker. And then a final aspect of a just workforce transition is creating job pathways with clear steps for advancements to grow and transition in the roles. This allows trainees to move from entry levels to careers in energy efficiency. And a really great career map that actually shows you how you can move up the level in different realms of the energy efficiency space is the Green Buildings Career Map, which can be great for workers entering the field or someone at the mid-level who's trying to figure out what field and where they would like to go next. Next slide, please. Great. And now I'm going to dive into a couple exemplar programs that we've seen just to kind of let you see what's out there and how things can be and what programs can be brought to Maryland. The first is the District of Columbia Sustainable Energy Utility Workforce Development Program. This program was actually designed to create energy efficiency and clean energy pathways for underemployed and underemployed people in DC, enhance local economic stability, and create a pipeline of workers. So this was a workforce program that was intentionally designed to uplift underserved communities and also has resources as well as paid externships. So they have community-based organizations, recruit workers for the programs. Training is offered free of charge, and participants are also paid a living wage while they're part of the program. The externship opportunities are with local contractors, businesses, municipal agencies, and other organizations that are all engaged in clean energy work. And then wraparound services are provided, such as interviewing, public speaking, resume drafting, and budgeting, as well as general education classes. Even like something like a GED is really important to offer here, as it can just be a minor barrier to entering the field. And so far, this program has an 85% placement rate in full-time positions. And I have heard DCSU talk about it, and they've even hired externships from the program, which is great to see. Next slide. The next program I want to highlight is from New Jersey. So PSE&G, one of the utilities out there, decided on their own to really invest in a robust workforce program that actually partners with community-based organizations on the ground to identify workers and then provide the resources to workers as they go through the training program. And this is their Clean Energy Future Energy Efficiency Program. So it partners both with community organizations and with the Department of Labor and creates what they call an all-in approach, which is a 3-part framework where they track and measure impact. They work with community partners and advocates to recruit and train allies, and then they pay for job training programs to facilitate recruitment and hiring. So they have a 3 kind of prong approach where they're measuring their impacts, partnering with community groups, and then also paying for the work that the other community groups are doing and paying for the worker to go through the training and the recruitment. And right now, this program has supported the plan of more than 2,600 individuals in clean energy jobs. Also, it has led to the state of New Jersey convening a statewide energy efficiency workforce working group to try to figure out how other utilities in the state can replicate this same system, leveraging on-the-ground resources that already exist and kind of using those in order to recruit workers and grow a diverse energy efficiency workforce. Next slide, please. So next is the Massachusetts Clean Energy Pathways Program. And this is the program back when I said Massachusetts switched over to greenhouse gas emission goals, and we've seen them like double their workforce investment. This is the program that came from the legislation that enacted the greenhouse gas goals and required more robust workforce training. To step back a little bit, when Massachusetts enacted greenhouse gas emission goals, they did so through legislation, just like Maryland did, but also in that legislation, they set aside they mandated that utility spend. It was 12 million originally, and it has now doubled in new legislation, I think, to up to 24 million. And this is all specifically for workforce in low income and disadvantaged communities, so that the training programs can target those communities and uplift those workers. And so for the Clean Energy Pathways program, job seekers are offered paid training and hands-on experience in the energy efficiency, weatherization, and HVAC jobs. They have a 3-month fully paid internship that provides skills, job placement assistance, ongoing support, as well as mentorships. And the program really focuses on just 2 pathways. So it's all building decarbonization, so just HVAC and weatherization. And they have a goal of seeing 100% of interns placed in full-time energy efficiency jobs. I couldn't find if they've hit that goal, but I believe that they're doing very good with it so far. Next slide. All right, I have 2 more. This is the last major program to walk through, and then just one more feature to highlight that I've seen other states do. So this next state is New York. So New York has their Clean Heat Connect program. And this supports trainees and businesses throughout the state. And this program is great because it actually works with local and small businesses and identifies new trainees and then pays for those trainees to join the businesses, be trained up and get certified, and then eventually work for those businesses. So it's a great way to help grow small businesses in the state and the workforce. So it finds the heat pumps, allows them to sponsor trainees and offers training and wage subsidies. In exchange for those training and wage subsidies, though, it does require that they collect and report metrics back to NYSERDA, which is their energy efficiency agency, on the number of workers trained, certified, and placed in jobs. And that's a great feature because then you're able to track program success and the data, which is sometimes hard to get at when you have workforce programs. So in New York, it's kind of a reciprocal exchange where they're able to help you find a worker and fund it. And then in exchange, they have the data and they're able to show how successful and how much their program has impacted the state. And then also, a flip side to this program is instead of just focusing on the workers that are trained, it also focuses on the businesses that are able to hire those workers. So it connects businesses in the network to potential new employees. And then it also provides cost sharing for clean heat advertising. So if they want to advertise heat pumps, NYSERDA will cost share those advertisements with them to encourage them to advertise them more. And then it also cost shares clean heat training, equipment, and training centers for bigger training facilities. Next slide, please. Excellent, great. And then the last workforce feature I wanted to highlight that we see in our region is a certified contractor list, but these are slightly different than what we see for just contractor lists where someone can go and find a contractor that will install heat pumps. These programs also look to invest in the contractors on that list and make sure that they maintain their skills and are able to have mentorship opportunities and other opportunities within the state. So the first is Maine's qualified partners list. So this list includes electricians, HVAC technicians, and manufacturers, as well as weatherization, plumbers, auditors, architects, and engineers, the whole gambit. But partners on this list gain access to training and technical assistance. They have added exposure and marketing help. Also, if you're ranked higher, you'll come up, customers look for you or look for a contractor. So they have a system where they're able to get customer feedback and they're able to then make sure that contractors with the highest customer feedback are top of the list. And then also there's networking opportunities and they can display certificates of qualifications. So they'll have swag like a Maine qualified partner sticker on the side of their truck. Vermont's Efficiency Excellence Network is very similar. It's a trade network of contractors, installers, retailers, designers, builders, and architects that is right now over 450 businesses. And Vermont is both businesses in and outside of the state. So even outside businesses are able to join because they can still work in Vermont. And the members for the Efficiency Excellence Network have access to co-branding materials, trainings, networking events, and exclusive program offerings. For example, you can only offer a zero interest loan that's part of Vermont's efficiency program if you're part of the Efficiency Excellence Network. So it's a little carrot in order to get contractors to join, because once you're in the network, odds are that you've received trainings, you are qualified, and you'll continue with continuing education classes to keep your skills up. So it's a great way to lift up amazing contractors in your state and make sure that they stay trained and skilled up. And I believe that finishes everything. If you go to the next slide, it'll just have my contact information. As I said at the beginning, we'll leave some time for questions for the members. And then if you have any questions about anything I presented on, feel free to send me an email. And thank you so much for this opportunity. It was great.
Thank you so much, Erin. We can open it up for any questions, not just members. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. And we'll keep, we only have 8 minutes for questions, by the way, so we can't spend too much time here, but we do have a little bit of time. I think I saw Mariana Your hand went up first.
Yes, thank you so much. Very interesting. I was just wondering, since the idea is just transition and being inclusive, do you know if any of these programs take into consideration visible and non-visible disabilities? Because contractors usually get into that field because they don't have the capacity of going uh, to another type of higher education, and sometimes it's because of that reason. So I would be interested in that component of the programs. Thank you.
Oh, just to make sure I understood the question, is it
I
whether
was
or not
wondering
higher
about the
sorry.
about the programs that you presented in other states that have to train um, people to know more about the technology. I was wondering if they have any sort of accessibility, because for example, I'm gonna present just one particular case. My son has dyslexia, and I know that for him, if somebody comes with a training that's gonna be extra studying, lots of reading, it's gonna be way harder for people like him to be able to access that sort of training. So I was wondering if when you were doing your research, you found out that some of these programs in other states have included some sort of access for people with disabilities.
So what I can say is I haven't seen anything that says that they've accommodated accessibility or anything around there. I imagine that manufacturers that do offer training in states that offer this training have had that discussion. And I think also it's important. I would just highlight that this field is very much working with your hands. So if they are doing training, I have a contractor in my life that has dyslexia and got his certification for things. It is the threshold to earn some of these certifications is not super high. And there are, I know, for example, in Vermont, they brought them into a classroom. So it's not just book learning, you can interact with others. So there's alternative ways of learning, I think, are definitely available. And it's not here is a book and you can read the book and study. It is more of a course on here is a heat pump. Today we're going to talk about how you plug this in and the different nuances of how it can break down. So much more in the classroom experience.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mariana, we have another question. Jennifer, would you like to ask it?
Yes, I'm just wondering, as the new administration is coming in, has been very clear in what their goals are, whether how you see the impacts in terms of our energy workforce here in Maryland in particular, and whether you're doing anything or any other programs in Maryland are already active to try and protect jobs at NOAA or other places that impact climate, that have large numbers of workers that live in Maryland, to protect those jobs.
Mm-hmm. So I believe that, so as far as the programs for the energy efficiency programs, like, and I think of the IRA home energy rebates, and there's also an energy efficiency workforce grant. It's called TREC, Training Residential Energy Contractors. We are also concerned that the new administration poses these programs, but how we're thinking about it right now, and this is exclusively in the energy efficiency space, we kind of have this luxury where both red and blue states have received this funding, and both red and blue states are using the funding for the IRA home energy rebates. So to take that away would hurt everyone across the board. And also, energy efficiency is unique, and I say this as a former environmental lawyer because, or environmental attorney that used to focus on water issues. I think this is a great bipartisan issue because it is, we're talking about lowering the energy costs for residents, and we're talking about making homes and buildings safer. So that gives me hope that this industry is protected and safe. As far as the jobs at NOAA and other agencies, we'll see what happens. I think that's the only thing we can all say right now because last week was, yeah, we'll see what happens with everything and how things go about, how he goes about enacting different policies. But I was gonna say, I have the luxury of, in this space, I think the programs that we're seeing come down and the funding that we're seeing come down will stay in place. And then I also would say that our states have been really great at taking the lead, Maryland being one of those states that has really taken the lead in climate and efficiency lately. And so as much as the federal government might be in disarray, I think this is a wonderful time for the regions and the states within them to invest in what they want to see their future like and build that, build up that level or that groundwork until we shift to the federal level.
We have
Sorry, I
3
can
more
be
minutes.
advertising.
I hope
Go
that
ahead.
answered your question, Jennifer. But I did notice that we have some energy efficiency professionals on the call, and I'm wondering if anyone else has any questions, and particularly if there's any members that have any questions. All right. If we don't have any questions from any members, then we can start getting ready for our next presentation. I will say that today's call really is mostly focused on just the energy efficiency space, and we've been focused on meeting our Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022. So that's been the focus of why we have chosen the topics that we have chosen. You can check out our work plan. Energy efficiency was on the work plan, and stay tuned, everyone, for next year's work plan. It's not going to come out tomorrow, but we'll be talking more about future priorities at a future meeting. So next up, I briefly wanted to just kind of introduce Ms. Jamie Lopp. She is a researcher at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL, at the U.S. Department of Energy, and she is our lead for our study for the Just Transition Working Group. So we'll be getting some updates from Jamie, and I'm really looking forward to her presentation, and I hope everyone here is looking forward to it as well.
Thank you for that introduction, Cindy. I appreciate it. I am looking forward to presenting this information, and if you all have questions, I believe we will have a little bit of time at the end. I'll try to leave some time to ask any of those questions if members have those. Just to really quickly introduce the study itself. So in case anyone was not present at the last presentation that we did a few months ago, where we introduced the study and walked through the different tasks, I wanted to just briefly touch on that. So if we could go to the next slide. When we were going into this study, we had a few key considerations. There are a lot of ways that we could research just transitions. There are a lot of ways, a lot of different perspectives you can take for just transitions and workforce development work. But we had some key considerations we wanted to make sure were included in the study. And so that helped develop this support strategy. Really, the idea was to identify opportunities, identify industries and trades, transferable skills, and then provide education and training and facilitate stakeholder engagement with communities that are identified throughout this study. So those key considerations really helped us scope the study and structure it in such a way that we could meet these needs and kind of follow this strategy. If you'll go to the next slide, please. The study is really made up of 3 overarching tasks. So task 1 that's where we are now. We are conducting the statewide community survey. From here, we'll move through the next 2 tasks. And at each step in this study, we plan to bring you an update, bring you results, bring you outcomes, facilitate a discussion of strategies and ways to move forward, and ways that this can impact the work that you all are doing. So as I mentioned, we're currently in the statewide community survey. We've been doing that work for the last few months, and today the plan is to present you with some of the results of that survey, answer any questions you have about the results, and talk about how that can impact the work moving forward, and then also how it will move throughout the study. So one of the goals of this study is to kind of create a template or a model that can be used at a later date. So that model would be illustrating, we'll kind of be strategizing on how to develop these just transition strategies and these career pathways for different jurisdictions. This immediate study is somewhat limited just on time and scale. So we're going to be selecting a relatively small number of jurisdictions to pursue, and then building that model out or building that template out that can then be replicated. So we could repeat this study, we could build upon this study across the entire state if that's desired. So if we could go to the next slide. The statewide community survey, as I mentioned, is what we're working on what we've been working on over the last couple of months. The survey really takes a couple of different perspectives. So first, we're looking at emissions intensity across the state, looking at county level emissions, identifying communities that are most likely to be disrupted by energy transition or affected in any way, really. Also looking at just transitions and how local economies and employment might be benefited or disrupted. And the goal of all of this is that last piece, which is the priority community selection. So all of this analysis coming together to assess all of the jurisdictions across the state and identify how we can prioritize those for the rest of this study. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and we'll go into the methodology that we used and the results of that in just a couple more slides. So if we could go to the next slide. Just really quickly, I want to talk through the data sources. We used all publicly available data. I can provide more information about these data sources if anybody has any questions, or if anyone wants to access them. It's all publicly available data, but just to quickly talk through them, the first two were simply looking at whether or not there was an IRA energy community located in a jurisdiction. If that's a pretty simple yes or no. And then also looking at communities that meet the thresholds for burden categories according to the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. Again, both of those are publicly available. We did pull the raw data for some of this and utilize it in our analysis, which I'll talk through in the methods in just a minute. These are both models that have been completed through different policies. Obviously, IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, has their own definition of energy community, which is based around coal mines or fossil fuel economies. And then the Climate and Economic Justice Tool is a screening tool that was developed that has a large range of what they call burden categories, and any county or jurisdiction that meets a minimum threshold for a certain number of those is qualified as a disadvantaged community. If we could go to the next study or the next slide. These next three data sources are a little bit more directly targeted towards our same goals. These sources are all a little bit more nuanced as well. So they're not quite as straightforward, but they in some ways require a little bit more modeling. The employment vulnerability to the energy transition is another fantastic metric. This has been developed. Basically, they used census data as well as some other data to develop an employment carbon footprint, which really looks on how reliant employment is, or an reliant employment in a certain jurisdiction is on fossil fuels. And what this does is tell us how exposed a community is to the economic shocks in a future with, say, without the fossil fuels. So should a coal mine close, that might directly impact a lot of jobs in that area, and they've found a way to calculate this. Again, I can provide some resources if you want more detail on that. There's a great research paper out there if anybody wants to read that. The next one you all are probably quite familiar with, which is the economic justice screening tool that was developed by the Maryland Department of Environment. So this assesses a number of metrics, but it is targeted specifically to Maryland, identifies the overburdened and underserved communities in Maryland. We really wanted to include this because every other data source we have here is national and maybe doesn't have quite the same like Maryland specific nuance that would have. And then last, we have the social vulnerability index. This is an index that is developed as part of is included in one of our modeling tools at the lab. This ranks communities on, I believe, 15 social factors, and these all fall under a number of themes. Again, I can provide more detail on that if you're interested, but essentially communities are given kind of a percentile rank, and anyone over a certain percentile based on these different themes would be flagged. If we could go to the next slide. Thank you. I forget sometimes that I'm not the one presenting or I'm not the one clicking. So really quickly, I want to walk through the methodology. This study, like I mentioned before, took kind of two perspectives. So first we were looking at just the emissions analysis, and then we were also looking at the just transitions analysis, and then trying to kind of pull those pieces together to look at employment vulnerability. The first step was to identify and collect the publicly available data. So we looked at this data at a county level. This decision was made simply because it was the most, it was both the most effective, but it was the most uniform way to assess the data. Census tracts get really messy, and not all of the data sets were already broken down into census tracts. So everything you're going to see when we're talking about this is going to be at the county level. So when I'm talking about jurisdictions, that's generally speaking at the county level. From that point, we synthesized the data set, combined all of these different metrics, calculated percentile scores for each county in each data, at each data point. So any given county would have a percentile score for all of these data sources that I just walked us through. Those percentile scores are then combined and you're given an overall percentile score. From there, we developed some weighted models, and that's what we're going to go through in just a moment. So those weighted models tell us how the different counties break down depending on what we're prioritizing, right? It's a pretty straightforward concept. I'm sure you all are familiar and have had weighted grades in school. It's a similar idea. So we developed 3 different weighted models based on the 3 kind of primary data points. All of these models include all of the data points. So it doesn't mean that a weighted model that focuses on the employment vulnerability score doesn't eliminate, for example, the Maryland Energy Justice score. It just weights employment vulnerability score slightly higher in that overall score. And then from that point, we applied those weighted models to all of the counties or all of the jurisdictions and completed the analysis from there. All right, if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So as I mentioned, the first step was identifying counties, or the first step to identifying jurisdictions was to calculate an overall percentile score for all of the counties. This is unweighted data, and you can see kind of at a glance here that we were able to calculate an overall percentile score, and there's a pretty broad range represented here. So some counties are as low as the teens, and then some are getting up into the 70s, 80s, and almost to a 90th percentile score. This is, again, all of those data sets I mentioned. So the MEJ, the SVI, the ECF, the CGIST, the disadvantaged communities, all of that combined. We could go to the next slide, please. And I'm moving quickly, so if anybody needs me to pause, feel free to, if any members need me to pause, let me know, or if I need to slow down, let me know, Cindy. So I want to refocus really briefly before we dive a little bit deeper into the method or into the results. All of these results, all of these weighted models are really just about the priority community selection. So we assess the entire state. We have a model for the entire state now, and that can be used as a template for later work. That can be repeated, this type of study, in the next 2 tasks that we're going to be doing throughout the next few months of this study can be repeated until we've covered the entire state. And we can also repeat or do further analysis on this initial task if that were needed. But I believe that this gives us a really good map of how the counties are, how the counties can be prioritized based on these different metrics. And what you want to do with that information is really what we're presenting to the working group today. So it's not my decision where we go next or how you want to prioritize and focus. These weighted models are, I think, a good indication of some things, and you'll see that when we get into the different models. But it's really about the working group understanding the results and then being able to make that prioritized decision as we move forward. Jurisdictions in the models can be prioritized in a lot of different ways, is basically what I'm saying. So I see a question in the chat, a couple of questions in the chat. Is there a map where the priority communities are that also shows who in the State House and State Senate represent those areas? I don't have a map that currently has elected officials overlaid on that. That's something that we could pursue if it were needed.
I think we should hold questions until the end. Yeah. But if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to address them at the end.
Yeah, we should have plenty of time. I'm moving fairly quickly, so we should have plenty of time for questions. All right, so I mentioned there were 3 primary models that we developed for this analysis. The employment vulnerability, you may also hear me call it a ECF score. That model, the social vulnerability index, and then the Maryland Energy Justice model. So these 3, as I mentioned, all include the same data. Every model includes all of the data. It's just how they are weighted. So the employment vulnerability to the energy transition, or that ECF score, is the employment carbon footprint I mentioned earlier. This model was chosen, we weighted a model in this direction simply because it's best aligned with just workforce transition goals and really is focused on exactly the work that we're trying to do here, which is identifying vulnerability that is directly related to employment in fossil fuels. It also, goes a little bit deeper in that. It also considers related or connected industries. So it's not just looking at, for example, a coal mine, but also, for example, transportation is an industry that could be impacted by a transition away from fossil fuels. So it goes pretty in depth in looking at how that vulnerability can be calculated. The social vulnerability index really assesses a broad range of social factors and themes. These social factors and demographics are often informed by workforce development and employment. And so we wanted to include and model something that highlighted that or weighted that a little bit higher. And then finally, the Maryland Energy Justice, which is a Maryland specific data screening tool we wanted to include, and then focuses on the overburdened and underserved communities as developed for Maryland, so as defined by MDE. And so everybody has a slightly different definition of what a disadvantaged community or an underserved community is. And so we wanted to make sure that we included that Maryland specific definition.
The Maryland specific definition, by the way, comes from a law, which some of the members that are not here helped shape So it's in law, and it was required of our agency to develop some considerations around that law. And you can always check out our website to learn more.
All right, so if we could go to the next slide, we'll just, again, quickly dive a little deeper into the results of these different weighted models. And what you're going to notice is that a lot of the same county names are going to appear. The 3 weighted models combined only revealed, if you took the top 10 counties or jurisdictions from each weighted model, the total number, if you subtracted duplicates, was 15. So you're going to see a lot of repeated names, and this makes sense as the same data is included in every model, just weighted slightly different. So you'll see them change position a little bit. This is the ECF for that employment vulnerability score. This is, again, all the data is included. This one weights employment vulnerability a little bit more strongly. The top 10 counties you can see listed, and then of course I've included that map that just kind of shows where they're located geographically. Something I want to point out here, and that you'll see in all of these models, is that the geographic distribution is pretty broad across the state. It's not all located in urban centers or rural locations. If you go to the next slide, please. This is the social vulnerability index weighted model. So this model just weights social vulnerability index metrics higher. In other words, counties or jurisdictions with a higher percentile score there will have a higher percentile score here. Again, you're going to see a pretty broad geographic distribution across the state, and you're going to see some pretty similar jurisdiction or county names in those top 10 counties. And then last, we have the Maryland Energy Justice weighted model. And same observations as before. Those percentiles are also going to be pretty similar across the board. I believe the lowest percentile scores are in the employment vulnerability weighted model, and the highest percentile scores are in this Maryland Energy Justice weighted model. That doesn't necessarily impact, it doesn't necessarily make a huge difference as far as the analysis goes. It's just going to illustrate kind of why the scores are a little bit different. So because this study is assessing priority community selection, or that's the last task of this study, the goal is to use this analysis to select up to 6 counties or jurisdictions, and from there we will take that analysis deeper. So we'll go into the next step where we're going to do a decarbonization opportunity assessment. We'll be doing some in-depth modeling on the 6 jurisdictions, and then bringing that back to this working group and facilitating discussion on decarbonization strategies. From there, we will down select again. So we'll take those 6 and then we'll prioritize 3. That prioritization, again, this is all just for the purposes of the study. All of this can be repeated. It's just a prioritization on what jurisdictions are going to make the most sense or give us the most, for various reasons and various priorities. So we'll down select from the 6 that we choose over the next month or so to 3, and those 3 final counties we will do an in-depth career pathways assessment on. We'll look at supply, demand, and identify career pathways, and then from there present that again to this working group where we can talk about utilizing that to strategize and create recommendations or strategies for just transitions in the state of Maryland. With that in mind, if we'll go to the next slide, we have the top jurisdictions this slide has by geographic distribution. So do you have one more slide? I don't know if you skipped a slide or maybe it's the next slide that has the names of them. Okay, so go back. Sorry. Go back one more. Let's see if, there we go. Okay. I was just looking for the county names. I have them on my screen, but I wanted to make sure those were visible. So we have the top 6 here from each model, keeping in mind that we're going to need to select about 6 to move forward with, so up to 6. I pulled the top 6 from that top 10 list of each model. Eliminating duplicates, you see that that gives us a total of 7 counties. In every model except the SVI, Washington and Caroline were switched. So all of these models, these are all top in the top 10, but in the top 6, there was just a discrepancy on which one was number 6 and number 7. So the added, you'll see the added section here, resource subtraction. This is just kind of an extra little analysis that I was able to perform because I was able to get some what I would consider positive resources, data around positive resources in the state of Maryland at the county level around current or existing clean energy jobs. I wouldn't put a lot of weight in this. I just thought it was interesting to kind of look at if you, what the percentiles look at if you remove essentially those positive resources, what that looks like, how those percentiles can be altered slightly. Now if we can move to the next steps slide. So this is just the geographic distribution of those same 6 or 7 counties. And that brings us to the next steps. So we've been talking about a little bit, this priority community selection. That's where we are right now. Selecting the jurisdictions for the initial study focus. Again, this is just to build a template for future study and strategies. So selecting any jurisdiction does not mean that others are completely forgotten or abandoned. It just means that for the purposes of this study, we're choosing 6 so that we can continue to move forward with the study, continue to kind of build out that template or model, which can then be repeated at a later time. The next step from here will be to complete that decarbonization opportunity identification. So we will analyze all possible areas for decarbonization opportunities within those 6 jurisdictions, and we'll generate some local specific data to inform like goal setting and planning. We'll have a strategy conversation at that point and move forward from there with that additional with the down selection of just 3 of those counties. The last stage of the study will be to look at clean energy strategy development. So we'll be supporting, we'll be completing the career pathways assessment, looking at supplies and demands, and then supporting this working group and leveraging the outputs from the decarbonization opportunity assessment and identifying like cost-effective and appropriate strategies based on what we've learned throughout the study for resource investment in those 3 counties. And again, all of this is to kind of just build a platform. This will give us a really good idea of what can be done and how it can be scaled across the state. And with that, if you would go to the next slide. I will open it up for questions and some discussion. I want to just point out the just transition principles. I think these are important to consider in any discussion around prioritization, because this is what the working group has determined are the principles for just transitions, and the goals and the focus of this work group should always kind of center around that. So if I have any questions in the chat, or I can take questions from members in the group as well.
We had questions from, oh, well, let's start with members. Mr. Sean Strazer.
Hi, Jamie. Are you able to share this presentation with us?
Yes, Cindy has a copy of this presentation, and I believe we'll be sharing that. So.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Absolutely. Everything will be posted on our website.
Would you be able to email it out to the members, please?
Yes. Did I lose my mic? Yes, we can do that as well.
I wanted to address Jennifer's second question. I kind of already touched on the first about the map where communities are. The second question, have elected officials in these communities been notified that their constituents could get specific opportunities as a result of this work? I haven't, at NREL, we have had no interaction with elected officials. As I mentioned before, so we've assessed every county, every jurisdiction. This report has kind of made some recommendations on what those, based on our analysis, what those priority communities could be. But we won't necessarily move forward. I'm not making the decision about what those priority communities are. That's for this work group to decide. Hopefully the presentation helps you make those decisions. I will also just add, and then Cindy, you may have something to add on this, that at this point, we're still pretty early in the study. So I think as we get into that down selection and we're actually working directly with identifying pathways and strategies. So in another few months, that might make more sense as to when that kind of conversation would want to happen. But Cindy, I'll toss it to you if you have anything else to add.
No, just we'll be sending out more information on next steps to the members, so stay tuned on ways to provide feedback as we go along, because we do want to be incorporating your feedback as we go along. Thank you. Ms. Jennifer?
Yes, I just wanted to mention the reason I was asking about whether those elected officials are aware of this is because my sense is that many of them are not supportive of funding for this kind of program. And so, and there are, you know, efforts in the legislature around funding for such programs, and they could be important advocates for support for these sorts of programs. And if they knew it directly benefited their constituents, it could help us.
So HB 864 is a law that already passed. Those are existing programs, so they're there. That's the beauty of what Erin presented on. Like, we're not expecting that to go away. As far as beyond energy efficiency, there is a lot of opportunity, and that's what this working group is going to be hearing more about in the coming months. In regards to the specific outreach to specific politicians, we're mostly focused on the members here, so there are some representatives, but beyond that, we are not engaging specifically, but these are public meetings, and these are public resources, so they're available.
Is there any other questions?
So we're at the last 10 minutes. We have some time for questions for Jamie, especially members, if you have any questions. But if there are no questions, we can open it up for public comment. Final call for study specific questions. All right, so we'll open it up for public comment in that case. Mr. Jeff Silva?
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, and for everyone's awareness, Mr. Jeff Silva is an amazing Maryland citizen that often attends Maryland Climate Change Commission meetings, and we're really grateful to have a citizen as engaged as Mr. Jeff.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the distinction of being practically the only private citizen that attends these meetings. And thank you very much for hosting it. Thank you very much to the members who volunteered and are participating. My main issue is that I thought that there was going to be the science technology work group meeting that was going to take place according to what I saw in last week's calendar at MCCC, that website. That's what I was informed. And all of a sudden it's a switch and change. And naturally, there is no documentation preceding this meeting, particularly the slideshows, that seemed very informative. And and I wasn't able to follow it because, well, naturally, it's nice to have it, to view it in advance, to be able to make some contribution. But that problem is not only with this work group, it seems to be with many of the newly established ones, such as the energy, resiliency. That work group happens to be notorious, and it gives the rise that the industry is basically.
Please note that this is only the Just Transition Working Group, so please.
Yes, I understand. Thank you very much but if you want the public to back you, you're going to have to try to make sure that we can work with the material to be able to advocate on behalf of these measures that you have to bring to our attention in order for things to improve. Goodbye.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned earlier on the call, all of our materials are always posted on our website. So everything will be available, all of the slides from MDE, from NREL, from our good folks at NEEP, Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership. So if you are interested in learning more, please go ahead and check out our website. Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that might have a question or a comment? We have only 6 more minutes. If you do have comments regarding other working groups, please reach out to the appropriate representatives for those working groups. But this working group is just relating to the Just Transition Working Group. So thank you all again for having joined. I look forward to seeing you again soon, and stay tuned. There's a lot of exciting work ahead. Hope you have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.